news we are getting at about 1 p.m. this afternoon. President Obama promising significant announcements in the course of his visit in a response to a question from Headlines Today at Rajghat, where he was a short while ago. The US President said it will be difficult to match this grand welcome. However, there will be significant announcements during the visit. That's what he said to our correspondent when a question was put to him. His response was, expect significant announcements during this visit. It will be difficult to match the grand welcome that has been given. That's the what we're getting at the moment, Obama's tribute at Rajghat. We're going to go to our correspondents who are tracking every bit of information. Remember, the US President now goes to Hyderabad House, where over lunch, delegate-level talks, and we're told possible one-on-one will also take place between the two leaders. That's expected in a short while from now. Let me try and go to our correspondent who's there at the moment. But that's important that the US President has chosen this moment to speak and give his first and create an expectation around the visit. Is that part of the problem? Joining us also now, Veena Sikri, former diplomat, joining our lunchtime roundtable here. But are we putting too many expectations on this visit? Is that part of the problem that we in the media, particularly 24/7 television, loves to hype up every visit? So in this minute-to-minute coverage, we're looking for every morsel of information and thereby perhaps trying to place so many expectations that if it doesn't result in what we want, then there'll be disappointment.
Well, I think that the expectations are from both sides. President Obama has accepted this invitation, as we know, readjusting his State of the Union message. And of course, he also has to deliver because he is facing criticism there as well. On the Indian side, it is a great honor that President Obama has accepted the invitation. And also our Prime Minister does want a specific delivery on certain issues. We do know that on the nuclear liability issue there is going to be some solution relating to the insurance cover. An insurance pool will be created. I think there will be significant achievements on the Defence Trade and Technology Initiative.
Right.
And certainly there's talk about the unmanned aerial vehicle. There's talk about...
Okay, I'm going to just stop for a moment. I just want to break from those pictures for a moment to show you something, because before the break we were asking viewers questions. The question, did Martin Luther King, when he came to Rajghat, when he came to India in 1959, did he go to Rajghat? What did he do? If my producer can show, here's a picture that I've got as we zone in. Martin Luther King along with his wife visiting Rajghat in 1959. And this is the picture. We'll try and get you a bigger slice of it. But he certainly did visit Rajghat in 1959 and paid tribute to the Mahatma. And this is what he said on arrival. On arriving in India in 1959, Martin Luther King, a great inspiration for Barack Obama, had said, to other countries I may go as a tourist, but to India I come as a pilgrim. That's what he said. There is Martin Luther King on this historic occasion, someone who has been an inspiration for Barack Obama and remains an inspiration indeed for many non-violent activists. And of course, he was inspired in turn by the Mahatma. So in a sense, connecting histories
then
at a moment.
Mandela.
Okay, since before you leave us, Kanwal Sibal, this afternoon, I thought I must get that in because you felt that, look, we are exaggerating the symbolism of all this. I know that we are going down to talks in a moment in Hyderabad House where I don't think what Martin Luther King said in 1959 will matter at all. But the fact is that, you know, as King said, and maybe Obama may say the same thing, I go to other countries as a US president, I come to India with a certain sense of reverence because of the deep attachment that if you read his books, that he has for Gandhi. He reveres King, and King in turn revered Gandhi.
I can understand that if we could give evidence concretely about how much this has actually influenced US policies towards India. Now, if somebody can tell me that because of...
So he's the first US president who's come to India twice. I mean, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at hard facts. He's come to India twice.
It's not as if Prime Minister Modi told him, look, you have a special bond with Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, so therefore please come and be the chief guest at our Republic Day. The calculations of Prime Minister Modi inviting him and the calculations of President Obama accepting the invitation are altogether different. They are looking at a very reinforced strategic partnership, and they both feel that there is on the Prime Minister's side, he feels that the United States is necessary for his development agenda. And for the United States, they feel that with Modi in power, action-oriented leader and wedded to economic reforms and building India and his manufacturing capabilities. Now there are opportunities for U.S. business in India, and hence his interest, plus of course his strategic calculation that China has to be, hedging strategies towards China has to be put in place, and India would be a major contributor to that. Okay. Those are the things, nothing to do with Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes, I think Kamal has, look, I think neither of these are mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Yes.
I think the important point is that the US-India relationship is evolving in a direction in which it's never been before, to the extent of us understanding each other's mutual interests. While there are differences, we are not going to go along with what the United States may want us to do as far as our relation with the Russians is concerned. But there is that real aspect, but also human beings have yearnings beyond the mundane. And I think the message of non-violence of Mahatma Gandhi is inspirational across the world. And the fact of the matter is that you have had a US president, rightly or wrongly, who was associated with Martin Luther King and the non-violent movement for the struggle of African Americans for their rights. So the two are not mutually exclusive. Like Kamal, I'm a realist, and I look at the second part of it equally. But I think mixing up the two is not a bad thought.
Okay, let's then come to the meat and meat of this visit, because that's going to be over lunch today, and then the delegation level talks at Hyderabad House. Just before we take a break, I want to go right round the table and ask you all, what is that one thing that you would like to see emerge at the end of the talks? What do you believe will be the focus of the talks? Is there a particular issue that you see emerging as the focus? Because here's the US president telling headlines today, expect something substantial out of this visit.
Well, there are
there
are two things which the Americans want, and which also is something which we can also look at positively. One is some breakthrough on the nuclear deal, so that the nuclear deal can be implemented. And second is defense. Under the DTTI, the Americans are proposing certain projects, and I think one or two could be announced.
Nuclear cooperation and defense. Casey?
I think they are expecting something on climate change, because China, that is what he got out of China. That's what he's talked about in his State of the Union address. That's a legacy issue for him. He wants this Paris meeting to be successful and the post-Kyoto arrangement to be in place. So that is one thing where he would want something. On the nuclear thing, I think they will accommodate. The Americans will accommodate. US president is giving a signal. He realizes it's important, and he will probably limit it to the compensation bit and take out the tracing bit.
Okay.
I'm inclined to agree with both Kamal and with Casey. I'd say this.
Wonderful to have three diplomats agree, but go ahead.
I think the fact of the matter is that this is an important visit in terms of deliverables.
Yes.
I think that we have negotiated very skillfully on the nuclear deal and the nuclear liability bill. And therefore, I think we will move ahead. Because the Americans also realize that if they don't join the bandwagon, it will be grabbed by the Russians and the French. So they also can't hang on behind. On climate change, we are not going to follow the China model. We cannot cap our emissions by 2030 as China will. I think what will be agreed to is a much greater use of non-conventional energy like wind and solar, which we've already spoken about, 100,000 megawatts by 2022. That will be a movement forward. In defense, definite deliverables. There are a huge amount of things which we are looking for, apart from what we have taken, including artillery, including helicopters, and including things for our newer aircraft carrier being built in India. Okay. The Americans can deliver, but I think we have done a sensible thing, and this is where we differ with China, and where we've played our diplomacy very skillfully. We have extremely good relations with all major arms suppliers: Russia, Europe, Israel, and the USA.
Okay. Jyoti?
I think all these so-called deliverables, or whether it's the nuclear deal, climate change, on the expansion of the defense framework, these would amount to a transactional relationship. I think India and the US have to build much more trust. The Americans
But it is a transactional relationship.
No, I think,
sorry to interrupt. No. Is it a relationship which is based on trust? Isn't it primarily transactional?
I think so far it has been transactional, but I think if India and the US, as Atal Bihari Vajpayee, our former Prime Minister, said in 2002, that he called us natural allies. If we have to move from this transactional relationship to one of trust, even if we verify that trust, then it cannot be transactional. And for that, both India and the US, especially the Americans, they cannot look at India only as a market, for example. There has to be the acceptance that we are a special, unique power. I think we are not only a civilizationally unique power, but in today's world, not only in South Asia. And we have to be accepted as such. We may be a developing country, and we are a poor.
Americans are remarkably unemotional.
Americans are emotional. So you're, no, hold on. I think you've said is it a transactional relationship or a relationship based on trust? Let's be honest. Are the Americans by their nature people who will see relationships in transactional
based on shared interests, and we are getting shared interests in more areas than we were having.
No, the reason I'm asking the Americans, here is the US president cutting short his visit, not going to the Taj, but he has to go to the funeral of the
No, he's going to Saudi Arabia because he's in the region. Otherwise, the US vice president was
But the Americans see relationships as transactional.
Kamal, may I say one thing? If he had gone back to America without going to Saudi Arabia, he would have been strung up.
No, but the US vice president was going.
I would put it in a broader context.
Yes.
The aim based on mutual interest is prosperity with security. India wants economic development. Modi has a development agenda. He wants America to be a part of it for technology, for co-production, co-development, for renewable energy, and for many smart cities and so on. But that prosperity has to be with security. So the security interests are the internal security, the border management, and the geopolitical situation. And for the geopolitical situation, I think India is very well placed to take advantage of the 21st century.
Is this relationship transactional or based on trust? Quick word. Transactional or trust?
Transactions are needed to build trust. If you don't have any transaction, you won't have trust.
That's a good way to put it. Maybe the transaction, and they're taking place over lunch. So hopefully the lunch is part of this process of converting transaction into trust, because only if the two leaders meet on a sustained basis, rather than, as Kamal Sibal put it well, that after all the euphoria of the Obama-Manmohan visits, the fact was in the period between 2012 and 14, the relationship seemed to go through a dip, which would suggest that it hadn't got institutionalized to the level where there was continual trust
between the two countries.
May I add one more thing
to what Kamal said?
Yes.
It ultimately depends on India's economic and military power and determination and the political will.
Which you hope the Americans will help you build.
No.
You're hoping the Americans will help you build your economic
one by one, please. Yes.
Let me just complete.
Yes.
A strong democratic and progressing India with a high economic rate of growth, you get back to 7% of rate of growth, everybody will start looking at you, more so the Americans.
Okay, get back to the 7% rate of growth. The world will look at India, not just the United States. Is a final word this afternoon from G. Parthasarathy, actually one of the many final words, because we're coming back with much more after a break. And hopefully our producer will organize some lunch for us as we head into the break, because we haven't had a morsel since this morning, unlike the Prime Minister of India and the US President, who are promised a luxurious lunch before their delegation level talks. Let's take a break, come back with plenty more on Namaste or Namaskar Obama. To Kamal Mitra Chinoy, who also joins our Sunday roundtable from the Jawaharlal Nehru University International Studies professor. Someone who's much more closely identified with the left. You've traditionally been very untrustworthy, if I may say so, of the Americans, or mistrust of the Americans. Do you believe that the relationship is finally based on trust, or is it purely transactional?
No, I think it's a mixture of the two. If they thought we were not reliable with the nuclear liability bill and with civil nuclear power, just to give one instance, or the kind of weapons that they're selling us, then they wouldn't have had this.
Are you saying America's business is business? That this is purely in that terms a relationship which is driven above all else by the belief that India is a market and India must open up its markets. It's the future for us purely in business terms.
I don't think it's that simple. If you remember 1965 and 1971, they did all sorts of things, including stopping our spare parts. In 71, they sent the aircraft carrier. So they look to their own interest also. It's not that if they think the interest clash.
As any country legitimately would, as any country would.
Yes, of course.
What is, Casey, for you, the national interest of India? Let's look at it from an Indian perspective. From an Indian perspective, what are we looking to get out of this visit from America? Is it, as often described, we get so carried away by the euphoria?
He called it a defining relationship of the 21st century.
That's right.
And then he allowed it to slip, not deliberately. He had other problems. He had problems. You had Eurozone crisis. You had all kinds of global things. He had to pull his troops out. It's a global power. They have global commitments, and India somehow fell in a shadow.
But even at the moment, are we priority? Given if you look at Obama's State of the Union address,
let me give you an example.
His focus was on every other part of the world, not on India.
But they have said that they welcome what was look east has become act east. So they feel that India may be coming out of its strategic ambiguity, because we also try playing all sides. So in that process, they also, from their point of view, want a certain commitment. Now they feel that with Prime Minister going to Japan, much closer relationship with Japan, with Australia, they feel that India is willing to work with the democracies on the periphery of China and Vietnam, and therefore be, in certain elements, a part of the US strategy to somehow contain China without calling it that. You basically are containing China, because China is not containable.
Some tactical drones, naval deck guns, very crucial advanced equipment like, an electromagnetic launch system for aircraft carriers, surface-to-air missiles, as well as some smart munitions are all on the menu, Rajdeep, at this point of time. It remains to be seen whether, India, is willing to accept co-production contracts on some of these items, and whether it even has the capacity to absorb that kind of technology at this time. But it's very interesting what this menu actually has on it.
Interesting, Shiv, that you're coming up with those details, because they could eventually form the basis of the significant announcements that we are expecting at the end of these delegation level talks. Shiv Arut joining us with that piece of breaking news. Let me take a break. Let's take a bit of a pause and then spread this across the table. As I said, we are very keen to give some context to what is happening amidst all the euphoria and the hype and the photo ops. Now is the time for business. And as we've been saying, America's business is sometimes business. So the Americans will, at one level, be expecting clarity when it comes to critical issues in the Indo-US relationship. Back in a moment with plenty more. You're watching Namaste, or as we are now trying to rephrase it, Namaskar Obama.